Hello, I'm Tracy from MeatRx. I'm a coach on MeatRx, and today we are continuing with our success stories, and I have Vlad here. How are you today, Vlad?
I'm fine, thank you.
Good. Um, what was your life like before carnivore? What kind of health conditions did you have?
Okay, should I list all of them from the beginning of the beginnings?
Sure.
Okay, so I'll start with the recent years because they are more important. Before carnivore, I was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. That happened in January 2018. So I have a little bit more than 2 years with this condition. And the years before diagnosis were very difficult for me and for my family. I lost a lot of weight. I lost about 20 kilograms, which is 40 something pounds in, I don't know, maybe less than 2 years. And I was feeling very bad. I was very angry, very depressed. At a certain point, we were considering to visit a doctor to check my mental status because that was the problem. I was getting angry too easy. I wasn't able to focus, and I was losing short-term memory, which was very surprising for me. I had a very good short memory. I was working with numbers all the time, and all of a sudden it became very difficult to remember very short numbers. And of course, because of this mental state, I had conflicts with my wife, and the atmosphere and the mood in the house was really bad. And we were considering to visit the doctor to check mental status, neurological status, and so on. But I went for a blood test. There was a lot of pressure from my mother, who was a doctor. She just retired. She was a pediatrician, and she looked at my condition. She was my doctor for my entire life. She always looked at my conditions, and she insisted in getting a blood test. And at that blood test, things looked very bad from many perspectives. I don't remember all of them. I just remember the diabetic situation. The A1C, it was 11.7, which is very high. It should be somewhere in between 4.2 and 5 point something. It depends on the doctor. Some doctors have a different opinion. So it was a very high. The blood glucose in the morning was 329. I remember those numbers precisely. And I was in ketoacidosis. I was hospitalized at emergency room, hooked to the machines. I got a lot of vitamins, hydration, and of course insulin on the spot. So this is how it started. That was the beginning. Um, Prior to that, I had several. Over my life, I was quite healthy. I didn't have big problems, but looking back from the perspective of a type 1 diabetic, you look back and you see some signs already that could connect somehow, could correlate somehow with this condition at the end. So the legend is saying, the legend from my grandmother, I grew up with my grandmother, she's saying that when I was around 1 year of age, um, I had a very bad rash on my body, and they took me to the closest hospital. And I don't remember what diagnosed. She doesn't remember the diagnose, but they didn't give me a big chance of living. They said, we need to wait and see what's going on. And it turned out that after that episode, that took about 2 weeks, but then eventually I became healthy again. I refused to eat dairy, milk, especially milk. So it seems that it was a reaction that I had to cow milk, because it's a tricky, it was a tricky condition that I had. Uh, my mother was a student, and she I was born, she spent about 4 or 5 weeks with me, and then she had to go back to school. The school was about, I don't know, 500 kilometers away from my grandmother's village. And I had to stay with them in the village. They took a lot of care of me, but they probably fed me cow milk at very early age. They didn't have another option. And then later I read about the possibility of cow milk of causing type 1 diabetes. And it seems that statistically this happens. So that was the first situation that first severe situation in my health that I know about. I don't remember anything about it. But I do remember myself refusing to eat milk, especially milk, liquid milk, and cream and yogurt for the rest of my life. And then they forced it on me sometimes. I tried very hard to eat milk because I consider it a very good, nutritious food, but it just didn't work. It just didn't work. And only later in life, when I was 30 something, I was able to introduce some cheeses, especially aged cheeses. But since I started the paleomedicina protocol, I just stopped completely eating any dairy. And then I was healthy, but a little bit weaker than my peers. I was always one of the last kids in my class in sports, and I got into fights. I kind of got bitten, you know. Very skinny. It was very hard for me to gain weight, and I was refusing to eat a lot of foods, especially fruits and things like this, very acidic foods. I remember I didn't eat tomatoes until very late. So I did like meat. I did like cabbage, fish very much, but a lot of other fruits and especially in general plants, I kind of refused to eat for some reasons. I don't really remember. Slowly, I reintroduced all these foods, and at a certain point in my life, I was almost vegan, so things changed. And then after that, I just had the normal childhood with, I got all the vaccines, I got all the childhood disease, I don't know, like rubella and chicken pox and all these things. I had no problems. But around 6 years of age, I remember having some digestive problems. Here and there were episodes where I had like nausea and that went into diarrhea or constipation, and it seems that it came to me more often than to other kids, a little bit more often. I remember having some situation where I had I think it's called thrush. So it's something on the membrane in the mouth, and they came very often, especially in the summer, and they seem to be caused by tomatoes. And I had that for many years. So I had digestive problems my entire life. They were not very severe, but they were there constantly, and they are still there, many of them. We'll probably talk a little bit about it later. But I still have digestive problems. Then I think I was 26, 27. I moved to the United States for a period, and I became moving from traditional diet here in Romania to the fast food diet in the United States. It was a big step for me, and I got very fat. I got 92 kilograms. I remember that. I moved in the United States with 68 kilograms, and 1.5 years later, I had 92 kilograms. I was eating a lot of fast food. I loved it. Of course, everybody loves it. And then I started to become aware of the diet, and I tried to lose weight, but I did it the official way, eating a lot of cereals and orange juice and low-fat foods and so on. I cannot say it didn't work. It worked. I lost some weight, but I was always hungry and tired, and I didn't really lose all the weight that I wanted to lose. I started to go to exercise. Bodybuilding didn't really work for me. I had results, but again, looking to my colleagues, they're doubling their size while I was just struggling to gain some weight, and I was always tired. And then slowly I developed some allergies, and these allergies, they evolved into some very severe infections in my nose and my throat and so on. Really severe. All the doctors I visited, none of them was able to trace it down to the allergies. They all said it's a virus, it's a whatever diagnosis I got. And I got a lot of antibiotics I think for 3 or 4 years. I got a lot of antibiotics until one day when, after I met my wife, we moved together, and she told me she had allergies, and she said, you might have allergies as well. And I took some of her medication, and it just worked amazingly. All the symptoms went away, and I was like, oh my God, this is allergies again. But they were very severe. And we managed to change our lifestyle and work around these allergies. I figured out that peanuts could be a problem for me. In the spring, I had allergies because of the flowers and so on. In the house, it was an old house where we lived. It was some mold or something like that. So these allergies were very, very severe, but we managed to work around them somehow. And then we pretty much got to a point in my middle 30s. We started the restaurant business, and we had to taste a lot of wine and a lot of foods. And I cannot call myself an alcoholic. I was not an alcoholic, but I was drinking probably more than an alcoholic. I don't call myself an alcoholic at this point, looking back, because I didn't want to drink, but we had to. But we had to drink so much, like sometimes a bottle of wine every day. It was crazy. It was a roller coaster of getting drunk professionally. And
Wow.
then I had a lot of digestive problems, and then everything went down. I started to lose weight and become very depressed and angry and so on. So we get back to the present, when I was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. So overall, I didn't really have big problems, but digestive and dairy and some allergies until I just was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes.
Okay. So how did you go about implementing carnivore in your life?
Okay, so I'll take some turns before I just go straight to the carnivore, because it makes sense to explain it like that. So I was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. It came very hard for me to believe it. I didn't know much about the disease, what about this condition, what is it and how does it work, and it seems unbelievable. Like, it's diabetes is tricky because it doesn't hurt. So you find yourself in the hospital and they tell you it's very severe, you can die, and you don't feel any pain, anything, and you just don't believe them. You just think, okay, come on, it's relax, I'm not that guy. But you are actually that guy. And everybody around me, everybody had type 1 diabetes, and everybody had the same situation. Everybody was a little bit heroic. Everybody wanted to get out of the hospital next day, but really it's not the best idea. So this was the first thing that I projected about myself in the hospital. And then the first meal I got in the hospital was a plate with boiled potatoes, 3 slices of white bread, and 1 chicken leg. And having my mother as a doctor in my family, I have some very basic understandings of certain disease and how the human body works. And I was thinking that it doesn't really make sense for me that I cannot process carbohydrates to get a meal so full of carbohydrates, and they might have mistaken the meal for me. And I asked, and they said, no, this is for you. You're diabetic. This is what you have to eat. You need energy for your brain, so eat now. And I just refused. I refused to eat. I ate the chicken leg, but the potatoes and the bread, they just went away. And I called my mother and I told her, listen, bring me some foods without carbohydrates, because it's too much. Something must be wrong. And she was concerned, but she told me, listen, they are testing they're doing a glucose testing on you. So they see how much you can tolerate from that carbohydrates and so on. It turned out they didn't. That was the food for the diabetics. And the next morning I was starting to Google what's going on, and I ran into, very fast, in 20 minutes probably, and I ran into Dr. Richard Bernstein and his protocol of managing type 1 diabetes. He's implementing a low carb, high protein diet, and there is a lot of people, thousands and thousands of people, they are doing very, very well on this protocol of very low carbohydrates and high protein. And I bought the book and I started to read and I started to implement, and reading about this diet, reading about his protocol, going into Facebook groups and so on, I ran into the ketogenic diet, and I thought this could be a step forward from low carb, high protein, going to low carb, high fat. And I started to experiment with the ketogenic diet, and things improved from standard diet to low carb, high protein, from low carb, high protein to the ketogenic diet. They improved slowly. All the doctors I talked, including my mother, they were scared. They're completely scared, horrified of me trying this on myself. And they said, you're not going to succeed. You're going to develop very, very complicated conditions, and it's a disaster. You're going to kill yourself slowly. Okay. After talking to doctors for a little bit, and then I started to become very arrogant about that, because usually they were younger than me, and even though I have a different field of working, they're not as educated as I was. And their arguments, they were very silly, and they were quoting all these studies, and I have a very solid background in studying statistics. And when I was reading some studies, I looked into the statistics and things they were crazy. And there is a lot of critics on YouTube criticizing certain studies and so on. So I completely lost any faith in the medical community, especially here in Romania. And that pushed me to look for a doctor abroad. And because my wife is Hungarian and she's completely fluent in Hungarian, we looked in Budapest. It's not far away. We visit Budapest. It's a beautiful city. When I go visit my mother, it's very close. In 2 hours, we are driving there in Budapest. And we run into a clinic that's called Paleomedicina. And they are using a Paleolithic ketogenic diet to treat all kinds of conditions, including type 1 diabetes. And then we just drove there. We met Dr. Todd Chaba. We had a very pleasant discussion for 1 hour. And that was very convincing, very, very convincing, because he had simple arguments that just made sense for me. And all of a sudden, I was just very optimistic, and I gained trust in the medical community only after that 1 hour of discussion. So the Paleolithic ketogenic diet is a version of carnivore diet. And especially in my case, in cases with type 1 diabetes or other more difficult conditions, it's carnivore. It's 100% carnivore. Some other people with milder conditions, or people that just want to lose weight, they can introduce some plant matter, some roots here and there, just a little bit. It's fine for them. There is no problem. But there are very specific rules. It's not just a carnivore diet where you just open the fridge and eat whatever meat you find there. It's you have to have a very precise ratio of protein and fat, to 1 to 2, double the fat in terms of net quantities, not just raw quantities. You need to eat certain amount of foods. Don't eat too much, especially in my condition, because if you eat too much protein, you are going to increase your blood sugar. You need to eat only the protein that you need, no more, no less, which is a magical number. Nobody's talking about it. And also, Dr. Todd Chaba was telling me that we don't know yet, or the science doesn't know precisely how much, but it could be 50, 60, 70, depending on the body size, effort, and so on. So I try to keep it like that. 50, 60, 70 grams of protein every day, split in 2 meals, and add the fat. And also another thing in the Paleolithic ketogenic diet, it's the organ meats. It's very important because they give you all the micronutrients. As I said in the beginning, there is this debate about the organ meats. Are they necessary, absolutely necessary, or not necessary at all? In my case, having diabetes, and it's well known that people with diabetes, they lose a lot of B vitamins, and you could have other problems. You could come into this diet, PKD or carnivore, with a lot of deficiencies from the health conditions before, and it's really needed. And I had periods with a lot of organ meats, and I had periods with less organ meats, and I could see the difference. So in short, Paleolithic ketogenic diet, it's a carnivore ketogenic diet, but you have to take care of the ingredients, and you must somehow get the micronutrients, and the best option is liver, brain, and kidneys is good enough, and bone marrow is very good, and so on. So this is the whole path that I took from the low carb to this carnivore version of PKD from Paleomedicina.
Awesome. Did you have any kind of difficulties implementing that? Did you have any like diarrhea or any of that kind of thing going on?
Yes, I did. The most difficult thing is sourcing the food, because it's easy to find meat. It's easy to find probably everywhere to find meat in supermarkets, but to have really good quality meat and organ meats is quite difficult. So that was one of the problems. Sourcing meat, it's difficult. We are lucky here in Romania, and for that matter, in probably all Eastern Europe, that we still have traditional ways of sacrificing animals, and there is a lot of local producers. This will change. I already read about some law they want to implement, and they want to stop this, which would be really bad. But if you go in a village, people have animals around their house, and they sacrifice them before the Christmas or before the Easter. And then you have a lot of pork meat in the winter, lamb meat in the spring, and then close to the seaside, you have a lot of fish. But even like that, it was difficult to source these foods. And I developed an iron deficiency at the end of the last year. And that could have been because of eating too much cured meats. This is strange. Eat a lot of red meat and organs and develop iron deficiency. That's really strange. And I still had it. And then I talked to Paleomedicina and Dr. Zsofia Clemens, and she said, you got to eat a lot of liver, eat liver. And I ate liver almost every day since then, even if it was just a little bit. And I saw the improvements. Blood test will come soon, and we'll see the numbers to make sure. So that was one of the difficulties that we had. And I also think when people talking about a carnivore diet, especially against carnivore, they are talking about scurvy and sea vite. I think that's a real danger. But if you have good quality meat and organs and whatever you need, there's no problem. But living in a city and eating a lot of cured meats that were treated with chemicals, that might be a risk. Okay. Other difficulties that I had, I think in the beginning I was eating too much. Food is really good. And also I didn't understand very well the ratio, what happens. I did not, every meal that I take, it's home where I have a scale and I can weight it and measure it and precisely do it. And it's a learning process, and it's a routine that you have to create for yourself. We had to buy a freezer to stock in a different way the food, and refrigerator and so on. There is a routine. There is a thing that it's completely changed from the period when we were just eating soy milk with, I don't know, cereal and coffee. So that was another difficulty. And I found myself in situations where I injected the insulin and I figured out that I didn't have enough food to eat, or things like this. Because at that point, I was still injecting the insulin. And injecting insulin is causing hunger, and it's a circle that you go into, and you eat more, and you need to inject more, and eat more, and inject more, and it's actually not good. Some people could believe, some people with very low knowledge about human physiology, they could believe that you are getting fat or you're just increasing muscle, but it's not working like that. So eating meat and injecting insulin and eating too much, it was causing me some digestive problems. But they were the same problems that I had before. That's why I wanted to talk before about these problems, because it was not something new. It was just the same problems, but they came more often. And I observed that eating too much protein is causing me this upset stomach, some nausea sometimes, and so on. And as a consequence, the diarrhea came. That was, I think the diarrhea was rather a reaction of the body trying to get rid of an abnormal situation in the stomach, because the diarrhea came in like 20-30 minutes after the upsetting the stomach. And having these episodes quite often could deplete me of D vitamin and iron and some other stuff. I don't know exactly. And then I got in touch with Paleomedicina again. I went for a week to stay with them to one of their programs. And they told me, you are eating too much. You're eating too much. I decreased the quantity, and it's strange enough, eating less, it made me feel better. It resolved my digestive problems, not entirely, but very much. And then after that, I was able to get rid of insulin. These are the three difficulties I had: sourcing, eating too much, and digestive problems. But I just want to enforce that they are not new problems, and most likely they are not caused by the diet, but in the context of the diet, they changed a little bit. I was expecting to get nausea after drinking 2 beers and eating French fries. And all of a sudden I was getting that after insulin and liver. So things are a little bit different.
Yeah, that's incredible. So how did your life change after you started the PKD? How did your symptoms improve?
Okay. This is a roller coaster because in the beginning I was feeling very, very well. It's my energy levels, they went up. My mental status was very, very good. I was very calm all of a sudden and was able to focus and work better. It was a big improvement in PKD over the classical ketogenic diet, where it was still ketogenic, but I was eating a lot of plants. Coconut oil, if you are familiar or the audience is familiar with the ketogenic community and the way they eat, it's bulletproof coffee, it's all these fats, vegetal or animal, it doesn't matter. I wasn't doing very well on that diet, even though I was doing much better than on low carb, high protein, and much, much better than being diabetic without the diagnosis and standard diet. So there was step after step after step, and moving from ketogenic to PKD was a big step. It was very easily. The first 3 months, I was just doing very well. I gained weight, especially muscle. That was strange for me because I tried, I was not exercising anymore. I was just working around the house. And it seemed to be strange that I gained so easy muscle and lose fat and gain strength without actually going to the gym. But it could be the muscle memory, it's called. I heard about it. So I was just I was getting myself back. It was not it was not an improvement above my best self. It was just getting back. But then after 3 months, things didn't work very well. And I started to have those digestive problems that I was talking. And of course, I was trying different things, getting more insulin because I needed to gain weight, but I was losing actually weight. And in 1 year, I lost 10 kilograms, which is 20 something pounds in 1 year. Getting more insulin and eating more, I was actually losing weight because I had digestive problems and I probably didn't digest all the food, and I had all these episodes of just flushing myself and being depleted of vitamins and minerals and everything. And 1 or 2 days after one of these episodes, I was feeling really, really weak and I had to stay in the house. And I didn't know what's going on. I thought it's some chemicals or whatever. And finally, and it was also progressing. It was mild in the beginning. I was thinking I had this before, there is no problem. But 2 weeks later, it was more severe. 1 month later, it was very severe, and so on. And then I called Paleomedicina and I talked to them, and I scheduled a place for me in one of their patient events. And I went there and they pretty much looked at how I was doing. I also have a very good journal of describing and taking pictures of everything I eat, all the blood test measurements, weight, everything. I note everything. It's just a long, very long Excel, and I just put everything there. They looked into the history and they thought, this could be it. You could be eating too much because you're taking too much insulin, and it's a self-feeding circle that you have to break and just get out of it. You don't need that much food. And I have to admit that sometimes I was eating, I don't know, maybe 1 pound of meat and probably not enough fat. And that was not putting me into ketosis. That was taking me out of ketosis. And for a person with diabetes, this could be tricky, and you could feel very bad going back and forth into ketosis and so on. And probably those shifts, very rapid shifts from ketosis back and forth, they were causing me energy problems, and sometimes I was depressed, and it was difficult to control the blood sugar. Like the calculations, they just don't work. You need you need a certain amount of insulin in ketosis and a different amount of insulin outside ketosis. It's probably different. I don't know. I'm not educated in this field, but I observed myself and I observed the notes that I took, and this is what happened. So to conclude, it was very good in the beginning. It was a downturn until I went back to paleomedicina, and then they readjusted my diet and my protocol, and then everything changed in good, because they also, this is very important, they also stopped my insulin after 2 days spending with them.
So you have been doing this diet for like a year and a half, is that correct?
Yeah, as I said, since end of August 2018.
Awesome. Your story is amazing. And so now you don't take insulin, and you haven't for a while? Or?
No, I haven't. So since I think it's around 14th of October, the last year, I'm insulin free. As I said in our private discussion, there was one exception, and I want to make sure I talk about that and people hear about it. There was one exception. My blood sugar went to 132, and I said, why not? 2 units of insulin is not going to do anything. And I took those 2 units of insulin, blood sugar went down, and that's it. 6 months, except 1 day without insulin, and normal blood sugars. Normal blood sugars. It's a little bit more difficult to control it. I have to take care of the food that I eat and the quantities that I eat, to measure quite often to see what's going on. And in the past, even on PKD, I did some cheating. It's a bit too much called cheating, because I taste some vegetal matter once in a while, or stuff that is not 100% meat. I eat eggs, but that's not cheating, that's normal. So for example, PKD allows some people, some patients to eat honey, or I don't know, some root vegetable in small quantities. I also have honey once in a while, like half a teaspoon of honey. And when that happens, I know my blood sugar is going to shoot very high, like 130, 40, 50, something like that. But I do it in a conscious way. I know what the result is, and I know what to expect. It's fine. With insulin, I didn't see this effect all of a sudden, because the injected insulin was taking care of, at least in part, of that honey or whatever it was. But now it's interesting. I look at the graph and I just see how the pancreas is doing. It's not the injected insulin. It's only one layer. It's easy to read, and it's easy to understand and to dose the food. With insulin, you have 2 layers and you don't know how they interact, and it's a little bit more difficult to calculate the food. So that's a big advantage. And I know people with diabetes, they always struggle to calculate the carbs and the protein, whatever diet they have, standard or ketogenic, or they struggle with calculating the ratios and the grams and the insulin and so on. It's very, very easy to mismatch it. It happened, like, I don't know, 50% of the time I was miscalculating, just a little bit, and the result was not really what I expected.
Well, I know that your success story will help so many people. I appreciate you sharing it with us. Thank you so much, Vlad.
You're welcome.
And it was wonderful to meet you.
Same.
See ya.
See you. Bye.